Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the hidden depths of football's most notorious, forbidden fashion. Now, we usually just think of football kits as colors and crests, a simple way to show your loyalty. But what happens when the very fabric on a player's back becomes a massive scandal? Well, today, we're exploring the secret history of illegal football kits.
So, you might be wondering what actually makes a football shirt illegal. It's kind of a fascinating mystery, right? Because we aren't just talking about a simple clash of colors or a bad design choice here. We're shifting our focus entirely away from mere aesthetics and looking at the intense, bureaucratic, scientific, and even cultural dogmas that dictate exactly what players are allowed to wear on the pitch. It's a world of incredibly strict rules, and today we're going to look at the ultimate rule breakers.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. The Rule Breakers. Bizarre Violations. So, governing bodies, they literally police the visual integrity of the game down to the absolute millimeter. Take Denmark in 1986, for example. They had this absolutely stunning kit, but those tiny pinstripes actually contain hidden commercial logos, which totally violated FIFA's strict advertising rules. Or how about England in 2002? They had an invisible kit banned simply because it looked way too much like the referees' uniforms, and they thought it would cause chaos on the pitch. Atletico Madrid's 1999 kit? Banned. Why? Because the bear graphic from their coat of arms was deemed excessively large. And honestly, maybe the wildest one of all? Boca Juniors in 2013. They had a 3D crest on their shirt that literally required players and fans to wear 3D glasses to see the full effect. No way, right? The league deemed it an impractical gimmick and just shut the whole thing down.
But what happens when a team actively fights back against these regulations? Let's track Cameroon's legendary battle with FIFA over their Puma kits. In 2002, they tried to completely revolutionize football fashion with a sleeveless shirt. FIFA outlawed it. So how did Cameroon respond 2 years later in 2004? They showed up to the Africa Cup of Nations in a one-piece unitard. The shirt and shorts were literally sewn together. Cameroon claimed they had prior approval for it, but after a deep investigation, FIFA dropped the hammer in April of that year.
And wow, did they pay a heavy price for breaking tradition. FIFA handed Cameroon's football governing body a staggering fine of $154,000. On top of that, they were initially deducted 6 points in the World Cup qualifying group. Now, they did eventually successfully appeal the points deduction, but the message was crystal clear. You do absolutely not mess with the traditional silhouette of a football kit.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Performance Curse, Science versus Superstition. Set the scene with me here. It's a sunny afternoon on April 13th, 1996. Manchester United are fighting tooth and nail for the Premier League title, but they are getting absolutely dismantled by Southampton. They're trailing 3-0 at halftime. And then in this totally surreal, unprecedented moment, manager Sir Alex Ferguson decides the problem isn't the tactics, the problem isn't the defending, the problem is the shirts. United were wearing their infamous gray away kit, and they never wore it again after the first 45 minutes of this match.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between what the public thinks and what's actually happening behind closed doors. The media and the public just assumed this was a frantic excuse, a master deflection by Fergie to protect his players, driven by frustration and pure superstition. But the behind-the-scenes reality? It was actually rooted in science. United had been secretly employing Professor Gail Stevenson, an eye coach and vision scientist. She basically hypothesized that player sharpness was all about how fast the eyes react. She told Ferguson that the gray kits literally blended into the background of the crowd, resulting in poor visual reaction times because the players physically could not pick each other out quickly enough.
The immediate fallout was legendary. That gray kit had a 0% win record, 0 wins in 5 games. It was officially binned and retired just 2 days later. Interestingly, though, player memories kind of conflict on this one. While Ferguson cited the vision science, midfielder Lee Sharp later claimed that Fergie just stormed into the dressing room absolutely furious, yelling to get the kits off with zero debate about visibility. Regardless of the real reason, for breaking the rules and switching to a blue and white third kit mid-game, the Premier League fined Manchester United £10,000.
But as you can imagine, Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't exactly losing sleep over the penalty. He famously called it the best £10,000 I ever spent. And honestly, considering that shedding that cursed kit ultimately helped them stabilize their season and secure the Premier League title, he was probably right for sure.
Which brings us to Section 3, Culture and Heritage, Clashes on the Pitch.
So strict regulations meant to maintain sporting neutrality often clash directly with club heritage and social values. In 2010, Celtic's decision to omit the traditional Remembrance Day poppy sparked a massive public debate regarding political symbolism and the club's Irish heritage. In 2015, Rayo Vallecano wore a beautiful rainbow sash symbolizing anti-discrimination, but it was banned in certain matches because governing bodies have incredibly strict rules protecting political neutrality on uniforms. And sometimes the ban actually comes from inside the house. In 2020, Barcelona internally rejected a Nike design featuring a St. George's cross because the heavy use of white deviated way too far from their brand identity and, well, looked entirely too much like their fierce rivals, Real Madrid.
So, the crucial point here is that a shirt is never just a shirt. It's a canvas for identity. And that brings us to what is probably the most profound kit rejection in the history of the sport: the Argentina 1994 Adidas prototype. This wasn't just some bureaucratic squabble. It was a philosophical war over the visual identity of an entire nation.
Just listen to this description of the jersey. This is not just a shirt. It is an aborted future. That is a profound level of reverence and mourning attached to this specific piece of fabric. It really represents an alternate timeline of aesthetic evolution that was violently cut short by rigid dogma.
Let me walk you through the exact anatomy of how this rejection happened. Step 1. Heading into the '94 World Cup, Adidas tries to modernize the untouchable, sacred canvas of the Albiceleste, those traditional light blue and white vertical stripes. They introduce a disruptive third color, heavy black outlines. Step 2. This black border creates a super aggressive, imposing, three-dimensional visual weight. It's honestly a design masterstroke. But then Step 3. The Argentine Football Association president, Julio Grondona, sees the inclusion of black not as an innovation, but as an absolute desecration of their heritage. And finally, Step 4. The prototype is unceremoniously killed, completely stripped from production lines, and replaced by a much, much safer design.
But the story doesn't end there, because this shirt is forever haunted by a ghost. There's this tragic poetic symmetry between this discarded prototype and Diego Maradona's devastating expulsion for ephedrine at that exact same 1994 World Cup. Both the prototype and Maradona were deemed unacceptable by governing authorities, and both were expelled from the global stage just as the spotlight hit them. Today, when people look at those heavy black lines on the unreleased shirt, they literally look like mourning bands. It feels like a sartorial premonition of the heartbreak that was about to completely engulf the nation.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, Holy Grails of Fashion, the Afterlife of Kits. Now, what's really interesting about this is a concept called narrative scarcity. In modern collecting, physical scarcity is just a luxury. But narrative scarcity? That is utterly priceless. Modern consumers highly value the illicit mythology of an unreleased prototype. You know, a shirt that was completely erased by the establishment and never even validated by on-pitch glory. It remains entirely pristine in the cultural imagination.
Because of this, surviving pieces like that '94 Argentina prototype are curated on the modern street like a private museum of rebellion. Collectors treat them as illicit artifacts, almost like smuggled art. To wear it today is to make a severe, deeply analytical fashion statement. It's typically styled with brutalist layers. Think heavy, distressed black denim and structured, oversized leather coats. By taking the shirt completely out of the joyous, celebratory context of sports and putting it into this moody, high-fashion framework, it actually honors the melancholic, aborted history of the garment itself. It is a true rebellion against mass-produced nostalgia.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer with one final, provocative thought to leave you with. If a football kit's ultimate legacy, its deepest cultural value, is defined by the very rules it breaks, what on earth will the next forbidden design look like? Who is going to push the boundaries of science, politics, or heritage next, and exactly how fast will the governing bodies try to erase it? Thank you so much for joining me to explore the secret history of illegal football kits. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I'll catch you next time.